Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Talking with Kevin and Son and People You Should Know. This episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Through the power of story, our mission is to uplift through the power of our voice, inspire, share stories and experiences and perspective using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is hope, helping other people every single day. And today, we're bringing you something very special. This is a mini series featuring Miss Kristen Seymour, the director of corporate partnerships for KWAWS. I think I've got that acronym right. She is a deeply committed person to vulnerable women and young girls. She has over 30 years of global experience in the private sector of humanity and emergency response. So, Kristen, I want to welcome you to my podcast, Talking with Kevin and Son. Thank you and Happy New Year. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. I'm looking forward to having this platform to talk about what's happening right now today in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. We have a silent pandemic that was here before COVID. And what is happening during COVID is that more and more women and children are being sex trafficked than ever before in the history of our civilization. That being said, I am the director of corporate sponsorships for FWA, which is Flying with Air Survivors, which is a nonprofit in Miami, which aims to support survivors of sex trafficking with using remote telemental health apps. And I am also the lead communitarian for Divas Who Win, which is an organization in Athens, Georgia, which supports survivors of sex trafficking too on their journey from surviving to thriving. I hope that makes sense, Kevin.
It makes a lot of sense. And to our listeners, I just want to let you know, this is one part of multiple parts of a series we're going to do on sex trafficking. And I want to share something with you before we do a deep dive into exactly what this uncomfortable conversation and a much needed conversation needs to be in. So if you'll take a quick listen, I'm going to share with you a video I pulled off of YouTube. ABC News featured a speech that actor Ashton Kutcher gave to Congress. And I'm going to share that with you before we dive into the details of this business.
The right to pursue happiness. It's a simple notion, the right to pursue happiness. It's bestowed upon all of us by our Constitution. Every citizen of this country has the right to pursue it. And I believe that it is incumbent upon us as citizens of this nation, as Americans, to bestow that right upon others, upon each other, and upon the rest of the world. But the right to pursue happiness for so many
I apologize.
stripped away. It's raped. It's abused. It's taken by force, fraud, or coercion. It is sold for the momentary happiness of another. And this is about the time when I start talking about politics that the internet trolls tell me to stick to my day job. So I'd like to talk about my day job. My day job is as the chairman and the co-founder of Thorn. We build software to fight human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of children. And that's our core mission. My other day job is that of the father of two, a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old. And as part of that job that I take very seriously, I believe that it is my effort to defend their right to pursue happiness and to ensure a society and government that defends it as well. As part of my anti-trafficking work, I've met victims in Russia, I've met victims in India. I've met victims that have been trafficked from Mexico, victims in New York and New Jersey and all across our country. I've been on FBI raids where I've seen things that no person should ever see. I've seen video content of a child that's the same age as mine being raped by an American man that was a sex tourist in Cambodia. And this child was so conditioned by her environment that she thought she was engaging in play. I've been on the other end of a phone call from my team asking for my help because we had received a call from the Department of Homeland Security telling us that a 7-year-old girl was being sexually abused and that content was being spread around the dark web. And she had been being abused and they'd watched her for 3 years and they could not find the perpetrator, asking us for help. We were the last line of defense. An actor and his foundation were the potential last line of defense. That's my day job, and I'm sticking to it.
And the reason why I played that, because Kristen Seymour's day job is to champion those that normally do not have a voice, that their cries at night go unheard, that the opportunity for hope seems to be a pipe dream. And because of the work that Kristen does with her company, this is the reason why it's necessary for us to do this series. We need to have the truth. We need to understand the lies of sex trafficking. This is episode 1 of a series of many to come. Susan. Why do I say Susan? I got something else on my mind. Kristen, 2 parts to this question. All right. Want to know who you are, how you got involved in this line of work and why.
Well, who I am, Kevin, is someone who has had lifelong support from my family, most notably a warrior mother who has always championed the rights to access for full health care for women and girls in the United States. And from her, I've learned very many things, but I have never made the commitment full-time to working for a nonprofit. I've always been busy with spinning other plates. One of the most privileged plates I've spun was being a mom to 2 boys. But that job is, I'll always be the mom, but I'm no longer the parent. I have 2 launched children who are healthy and happy. And they know about trafficking and they know about consent and they know what it means to buy and sell a human being. And I'm hoping that with each person I speak to in the communities I work in, from a very grassroots one-on-one perspective, how do we change the paradigm of what is $150 billion a year industry around our planet? So that's who I am and where I'm from, and how I've ended up with the privilege of working in nonprofit focused on empowering women and girls.
Lately in the media, there has been, I'll throw out a couple of last names, Maxwell, Epstein, Prince Andrew, even President Bill Clinton, have all been associated with a horrible, horrible topic of slavery, sex trafficking. Me as a Black man, when you hear the words slavery and then hear sex trafficking, I don't see those 2 blending together. But I know I've had conversations with you, and I want you to educate our listener to exactly why those 2 names or those 2 titles blend together.
Okay, well, thankfully, in our media, people are talking about human trafficking, which is also called slavery, human slavery, which is the definition of that is providing services without monetary compensation. That's what we talk about as slavery in a historical sense, as well as a modern day current sense. The biggest difference, obviously, is that sex trafficking is just a portion of human trafficking. The human trafficking industry throughout the world is my latest statistics that I've pulled off from the international sorry, one second.
Go ahead, take your time. I just want to let you know that the names that I've listed or mentioned are names that are attached to this conversation that are a public domain while she is gathering her notes.
Correct. So the ILO, which is the International Labor Organization, the most recent estimate I could get was February 2021, is there are 25 million human beings being trafficked in the past year, and that's 150. It's just an astonishing number. So if we drill down a little bit to the state of Georgia, where Divas Who Win operates, each month over 7,000 men purchase sex from minors in the state of Georgia. And each month, a portion of that is 350 to 400 adolescent girls who are sold online every month. 90% of those minor victims are still enrolled in school. They're not urchins living under a bridge. They live in homes, and they're exploited nonetheless. It's a very, very frightening thing that happens all over the world, but also in our neighborhoods, large and small, rural and urban. So in the case of Epstein, who has implicated in his Black Book with Ghislaine Maxwell, many, many, many buyers of his roster of victims and survivors. So we call that sex trafficking. The definition of sex trafficking, of course, is the exploitation of people for the commercial sex trade. And what that means is it's a form of modern slavery as it's defined because of the way victims are forced into sexual acts, usually non-consensual. So an example of that is when a parent sells their child for sex to make a house payment or a car payment. That's called familial sex trafficking and child abuse. When a husband forces his wife to sell herself for sex, threatening to take their child away if she doesn't, that's called sex trafficking. It's called intimate partner sex trafficking and abuse. When a teenage boy convinces his girlfriend to sell sexual favors to feed his drug addiction, that's called intimate partner sex trafficking and teen dating violence. Those are some examples of what sex trafficking is.
Now, Hollywood has, and numerous of productions, has, I don't know, sensationalized or used sex trafficking as part of a plot line. I don't understand, you know, when you tell me about the numbers, I'm going to ask you about the numbers. How can we use such a inhuman act to promote a project and little is done, little is done in order to change his behavior or put the perpetrators behind bars and this problem still exists. I mean, I was stunned when you told me one of the commodities were young African-American boys between 9 and 13.
That's correct, Ken.
Tell me more about these numbers, and are these numbers real?
The numbers are real, and it's not a sensational, Hollywood kind of a narrative. That's been debunked. It's not being snatched off the street or stranger danger, and flown overseas to some godforsaken place where there are harems, which is also a form of sexual slavery in some religions. But it's happening every day on our street corners and in our homes. The pandemic has created the perfect storm for sex trafficking to thrive, which is isolation, not a lot of supervision, and tremendous vulnerability of being young and not ready to make decisions without guidance and structure and support. So that's the perfect storm for young girls and young boys to be trafficked and sold online in terms of pornography. Pornography and child sex abuse as the subject of hardcore pornography, which is on the black web, or what we call the dark web. The highest prices for that subject go for boys under the age of 10. That is one of the highest price categories for online dark web pornography, which is a shocking number. But the people who are enabling and trafficking child porn imagery are just as much of sex trafficking somebody who's chained in your basement, for example, or drugged in your basement or in a dungeon somewhere. So there are many famous names of people who buy sex. We don't have in our current law enforcement paradigm throughout the world, we have very little enforcement for the people who buy sex, who buy human beings.
Why? Is it because of the victims are people that are disposable, or why does it even exist?
I think that throughout history, we've found that sex is a commodity for purchase and for subjugation using power. So the very wealthy through history have found that it's part of their military strategy, for example, in some of the big empires of world civilization have been to rape, to kill the men, rape the women, and that's how you subjugate an entire population. That's a current military strategy that is used today, is happening right now in many places
Now,
all over the world.
you and I have had many conversations leading up to this interview, and this is one of many. And I want to thank ABC News and YouTube for allowing Ashton Kutcher's interview to exist on the web. And I suggest if anyone wants to know a little bit more or see his video in full length, you should do that. But there are a lot of celebrities that have jumped on board in order to combat or fight this. Demi Moore has partnered with a jewelry company and created diamond handcuffs. I don't know what that basically means. I have to contact her. Ricky Martin, Jada Pinkins, Emma Thomas, and many other people. But you and I had a conversation. His name escapes me right now. He's someone in Canada. His name is Peter. I watched a documentary. I think
Nygard.
what was it?
Peter Nygard.
Yeah, the Peter Nygard story. If anyone Googles that and watch this, you're going to shake your head through the whole thing, because if it had not been for him having another billionaire neighbor, his terror will still exist and his story would never have gotten told. Are you familiar with this story?
I am, and it has been said in the press that he makes Jeffrey Epstein look like a Boy Scout, look like a rookie. For many, many years, I think it's over 30 years, and I've met some of his victims that he victimized, and I've met some of the survivors.
And you've also testified in court in some cases.
Testified in court with Rachel Woods in regard to Marilyn Manson's most recent. I think he was just returned to the United States because he has a history of trafficking and abusing, locking women in a quote unquote glass dungeon. And that's sex trafficking. That's abuse. And it is most often met with, taking away any papers in order to travel, taking away identification, taking away any ways to exit, any communication tools such as a cell phone. It's difficult to get away from these people who are the predators, especially when they're in a position of power with money where they can pay, whether it's law enforcement or neighbors or whomever, to not discuss what's really going on.
And that's the backstory. And what caught my attention with the Peter Nygard story is that there were FBI investigations that started that mysteriously stopped. There were other local law enforcement agencies that ventured into it and then all of a sudden went silent. I know I interrupted you while you were about to tell our audience about this Peter Nygard story. I'm going to go ahead and let you go ahead and fill in the details.
Well, Peter Nygard was a notorious trafficker of young, very beautiful girls who went to his large houses, not just out of the country, but in the Los Angeles metro area,
Malibu.
and would be promised, acting and modeling contracts and all kinds of sort of empty promises, and they'd be given accommodations in the form of, rooms in a large, lovely home, access to driving cars and things. But of course, the pressure is always, if you don't do this, a la Harvey Weinstein, I'll ruin you. If you don't perform this way for me and my friends, I will ruin you. I'll make sure you never work in this town. And that's exploitation. And when you sell girls for monetary or for favors from other friends of yours, as Epstein did as well, that's called sex trafficking.
And for those of you that want to Google the Nygard story, you'll find out the reason why most of this information came out is because his own son could not stomach it anymore, because he fathered a child out of wedlock, and both the mother and the son joined allegiance in order to put this perpetrator away. There are people that are listening to this right now that are looking for answers. How do we resources? I mean, who does someone reach out to if they know that this is going on, and do they have anonymity?
There is anonymity. There is anonymity. At Divas Who Win, we have a community series where we invite the FBI and local law enforcement to talk to the PTAs, talk to the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, talk to the universities, the fraternities, the sororities, people are shocked when they hear that between 90 and 100 women and girls are serviced by Divas Who Win in their survivor network in Athens, Georgia, every month. They've never heard of such a thing. They don't understand what branding is. Most sex traffickers brand just like you would a piece of livestock if you owned horses or cows or cattle. The girls are branded usually on their breast or the back of their neck or around their crotch area.
Is it like tattoos, or is it actually?
Yeah, it's generally branding. It is tattoos sometimes as well, but Divas Who Win works with local tattoo artists to remove those. It's one of the services that they provide. It's a big service because when you look in the mirror every day and you see that you're forever scarred, not just on the inside, but on the outside, that really hampers your road to recovery.
I met a lady months ago that has escaped from that life. I won't say lifestyle, escaped from that lifestyle. And she is sponsored by a company called Wayfair. And they profess their innocence and said that they are wrongly connected to this conversation. Are you familiar with that?
I am, and it is another far-fetched conspiracy theory that has been debunked. And it's been debunked by Polaris, by the United Nations, human trafficking, and international organizations that fight human trafficking, sex trafficking, because it's taken away resources and media from what's really going on. There is no such thing as barcodes on Wayfair products that correspond to the price of buying a human being for sex, pedophilia.
I'm glad we made that clear.
And there are tremendous harmful fallout that has come from people who have been feeding and calling the local FBI and law enforcement about suspecting that their neighbor's child who has the same name as somebody as one of the pieces of the furniture, and these kids have been so traumatized, and they're not sex trafficked, and some of the victims have made their own YouTube stories and given interviews on how harmful it's been for them to be identified as somebody who's trafficked when they haven't been, and the resources that have gone into that have directly led to people slipping through the cracks that are trafficked.
And the reason why I brought up Wayfair, because I saw an article when I was kind of reading through this that still points the finger at them, even though that I had many conversations with people connected that say just the opposite. And Wayfair has launched its own attack in order to bring those that have wronged human beings into the justice system. And somehow the justice system at some point, no matter which part of the globe, seems to keep almost getting there and just missing. It's the same way when this is personal. I'm a firm believer. I don't think Epstein's dead. The amazing thing is that if I had a black book and I had done some horrible things, that would have been public 3 minutes after I had been incarcerated. And there's no way in heck that I could commit suicide in a maximum security cell. So that's just me. I don't know if he's actually dead or not. It's just my belief. Body has not been cremated. His family has not created chaos in the media, wanting to bury his body in a family resting site. I've not heard anything that says filed. But when I look at the fact that Mrs. Maxwell on 5 counts have been convicted, this is only, I don't even think this is the tip of the iceberg of where the problem is, because there are a lot of extremely influential people, not only in the business sector, entertainment sector, also in our political arena, that is either associated with it, are privy to the conversations or individuals, and still there's nothing to be done about it. And people such as yourself on the ground level are putting your life, your career, your reputation online in order to do the right thing. Why do you do this?
I do it because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing that there are more women and girls who don't have the opportunity to speak out and to be believed. I have a quick story about one of the people that I've worked with.
Please share.
We don't discuss their names, obviously for privacy, but she wants to tell her story. And her mother remarried, and she's not the first person, young girl who's been put in this situation from a wealthy family, a country club, what you'd call a country club lifestyle. The mother remarried and didn't believe her when she said at age 10 and 11 and 12, you know, daddy is hurting me. And she was not believed until she found out that she was pregnant with his child. And the mother denied it until there was a second child that was born to this young minor who was being trafficked by her stepfather to his friends and himself at his country club.
That makes me sick, to be honest.
She has lovely children. She's received a lot of support, but many people are not believed. And they're not believed by their own families because it's an egregious thing. It's unthinkable that you would sell a 5-year-old daughter of yours or a 10-year-old son of yours for profit.
Can these people reach out to you? How do they find Divas?
Divas Who Win .org is an organization which is on Instagram, on Facebook, and they provide all kinds of resources to survivors. One of the programs that I run is a retail boutique scenario for them where they come and they're trained in retail and inventory management, point of sale systems, how to talk to a stranger who comes into your store. And they leave with job skills, real job skills. You can't just leave the life of a survivor of sex trafficking with no education. We provide education, high school education, as well as college education, as well as some training schools for them. It's all at no cost to them. We have counseling, we have massage therapy for them to learn how to be touched again in a way that is not going to lead to harm and terror. And those are some of the many programs that Divas Who Win organization provides. Flying with Air, Erica is a champion of women. She's involved with many organizations because she, as a young model with a contract in New York City, was trafficked. Her entire house was trafficked. She has a book, which you're more than welcome to read. It's on Amazon. It's her story of what it means to be in the modeling and the glamour industry and become trafficked. She's a well-educated girl with great opportunities. And even with all of her wits about her and all the support she had from her family, she was trafficked.
And that title of that book is Trafficking Aftermath. Am I correct?
It's called, Erica's book is called.
I think I did my homework.
Yes, she has a follow-up to the book called Trafficking Aftermath.
Okay.
And it's available on online on Amazon.
You and I have also, in backroom conversation, discussed the fact that there are individuals and there are groups that are actively hunting down and bringing these people to justice. Can you talk a little bit about that, or is that not a conversation we can talk about?
I think that that's something that is very important to recognize. We have Tim Tebow's foundation. He's a well-known athlete, and he has decided, with his notoriety, to make sure that he sheds a light on some of these things and to intervene, to raise money to intervene and rescue, which is not an easy thing to do. It takes a coordinated effort. And also there is Tim Ballard, who is a well-known figure in the trafficking rescue missions area, and he raises tremendous amount of money to intervene and rescue. His underground, I think it's called Operation Underground Rescue. There are a lot of people who are well aware of this, but it's hard to articulate that we as consumers in a first world country, the United States, is responsible. 70% of the sex tourism industry are white American men who fly overseas to purchase for sale minors, minors being under the age of consent at 16, and the highest amount paid goes for children under the age of 10, boys and girls.
That seems to
conversation that isn't being had. It's not talked about on the news every night. It's not talked about in our homes and schools and churches, our communities. And the way that we can affect change is to educate our young boys what it is to buy a human being. We need to educate our boys before they become fraternity brothers and powerful athletes with big scholarships, or coaches on big teams, to cover up when they gang rape girls, or when they keep gang raping them and keep drugging them, and use photographs of them taken by other fraternity boys to keep them silent.
and it's just not fraternities or it's people with money that have a certain position in our society,
Right.
that some of us look up to and admire. And sometimes what we see in the light, we don't see the darkness. And these are stories. When you talk about 75%, this is not a conversation that is just, or something that's going on in just in our underprivileged neighborhoods. This is going in your suburbs. This is going into the affluent areas. These people, some of them are your neighbors, some of them are your boss. Some of them are in charge of our media, our entertainment. Some of the highest producing products that's out there, someone either knows or someone is attached to it. We talked about, and this is an ongoing conversation with human resources, grooming. How does this, what is the steps? So you as a parent, you as a friend, you as a partner, what are the things that you should look out for? Because this all starts with a random act of kindness that's unsolicited. And that's the reason why they call it grooming. And then it leads on through there. Can you explain to us what grooming is in this business?
Yes. Grooming in this instance, like Ashton Kutcher was mentioning, is, you're teaching a child that it's play. They're made to think it's a false narrative. It's not. You're not being filmed to play with an elderly man when you're a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. But that child is conditioned to learn that that's play, and that this is the false narrative. That's what grooming is. It's teaching somebody that is a random act of kindness, such as, well-dressed businessman approaching some girls who are freshmen in colleges in some of our big cities and some of our rural towns, saying, I'm taking a position in Hong Kong. I have a lovely apartment, a lovely home, and I don't want to get robbed while I'm gone. So I need, 3 or 4 girls who can water the plants and make sure my cars are driven, maybe once a week while I'm away. And obviously, that sounds too good to be true. And it especially sounds too good to be true if you're living in less than desirable dorms in the middle of a pandemic. And all you want to do is, have some online presence with your faculty, but as well as being supported by your fellow students. It sounds like a win-win, but then it becomes something else. They get the calls. Can you, show us your sleeping quarters tonight? Can you show me and my colleagues over here in Hong Kong? It becomes something else. And then it becomes, there are hidden cameras in the house. Do you think those girls want to call their parents or the FBI or the local law enforcement and say, I've been, filmed in compromising sexual activity online, and my parents, for all intents and purposes, they'll kill me if I go home and tell them? I don't know what to do. So how do you recognize that? How do you find out if a house full of people coming and going all the time generally at after hours, it does happen in houses and homes, and it's not just in hotels. How do you recognize that a teenager is being trafficked? They become more withdrawn. They have marks and behaviors that indicate drug usage or substance abuse, because they can't perform this way unless they are completely out of it.
I am committed to doing more with this to bring awareness to this sick problem. And I'll say it again, this sick problem. We're looking forward to having guests like Tebow to elaborate on this and to give support. We're having, leaving the door open, I think it's Tim Burke, is that the last name you said?
Tim Ballard.
Tim Ballard, as a guest and part of this series. If there is any young man or woman with a legitimate story that wants to share their story and what they are battling today and how they overcame, how they escape, we welcome them to reach out to us at info@rmkproductions.net. And matter of fact, I'm going to say, because you're the professional, I'm going to have them reach out to you and have you reach back to me to set up that interview. So how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, they can get in touch with me day or night through the 2 organizations that I work with. One is FWASurvivors.org, and the other one is Divas Who Win.org. And they can also report to any 911 call day or night as a hotline, as a mandatory reporter if you see a child with marks on them. If you are a therapist or a counselor in any way, you are mandated to report any misgivings that you might have or suspicions that you might have. The FBI and the local law enforcement and the people involved with this, trying to combat sex trafficking, they would rather have 25 false calls than the one call that didn't come, that was suspicious about a white van in the area picking up, and dropping off men to a certain house all through the night. There's obviously something going on there.
This is a call to action to any humanitarian that is listening to this. If you know of a story that needs to be told and you don't tell it, you're part of the problem.
This is correct.
If you are an individual that is actively participating in this, or you're part of someone in the grooming process, like Ms. Maxwell, it is time to come clean and turn yourself in. This has got to stop, because it's just not the foster care system that is screwed up. When you talk about 75% of this problem are white men in power, so the other 25% is broken up to the other minorities. These are people of affluence, and just because they have shiny things and, you know, homes across the world, they're manipulating people and taking away their dream. And their dream is for happiness, like Ashton Kutcher said. We've got a lot more to talk to, and we've only scratched the surface.
That's right.
And this is the very beginning. I'm going to ask you right now. I always ask each one of my guests. I'm probably going to ask you this 100 times over, because this is not the last interview. Your one ask, if you can have one thing that you can put out into the world that could be granted to you, that will change. It could be anything. What would that one ask to be?
You know, I'm asked that very often, Kevin, and my ask is always at a grassroots one-on-one level. My ask for FWA survivors would be to find a web, an app developer, an app engineer to help us with our telemental support portal app. We need some design and some back-end help, and that goes far beyond my skill set. So that would be my ask for FWA survivors. We need a software engineer, and we also need, for Divas Who Win, we're in the middle of a capital campaign to build a facility here in Athens, Georgia, to house our survivors with full security until they are ready to launch back out on their own. And that's a $250,000 ask. But I think if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's what God said. You ask and you should receive. That's the reason why I always say your ask needs to be big, S-A-S-K. I always say, when I started this company and this podcast, I surround myself with like-minded people. The people that listen to this podcast, that follow any of our podcasters on RMK Productions, on our YouTube page, they're not people that drive by accidents. They're the people that stop to help. If one of my listeners or many of my listeners are in a position that her ask can be reality, I ask you to reach out to her. And I'm going to ask you to give your information one more time, so that way people have it. We've said it 3 times. It takes 8 impressions before someone actually acts on it. So we're going to go 3 out of 8. Go ahead, shoot your shot.
Okay. Again, my name is Kristen Seymour, and I work with Divas Who Win, which is divaswhowin.org. And you can send us an email through that, or through Instagram, or through Facebook. And I also work with an organization called FWA Survivors, which is Flying with Air Survivors. And that is also on Instagram, Facebook, and at fwasurvivors.org. So please be generous, be thoughtful, help us to help the others who cannot help themselves.
And that she asked for help. And part of our mission is hope, helping other people every day. We've covered a lot of information, and we only scratched the surface. And at some point, this episode has touched you in a way that brings you to a higher calling, or touched you in a way that you know someone that needs help. Reach out to Kristen and connect with her to get that help. She has resources. We have other episodes that are coming up. We mentioned Tim Burke. Did I say that right? Tim Ballard. I'll get it right. And Tim Tebow. that are coming up with many others. And if you'd like to be a guest on RMK Productions or talking with Kevin and Son to elaborate or share your story, you're more than welcome. You're always a welcome guest, Christine. We'll be talking over and over again. And for those of you that have not followed or liked RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page, I suggest, because this is going to be very powerful for you to do this. Again, I suggest you listen to the full YouTube video of Ashton Kutcher's speech to Congress. It's 4 years old, but the conversation is still prevalent today. It is on YouTube. ABC News covered it, so I got to give credit to that. It's not anything that I own the rights to, but I suggest you listen to this. Please follow Kristen Seymour, reach out to her, and don't just listen to this podcast. Make a difference, be the change to be. And again, my grandfather always said, when you get to a point that you can help someone else, it is your duty to do so. Reach one, teach one. And we're coming to the end of this interview just for now. So we'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you.
We'll see you soon, Kevin.
All right, we'll see you soon.